boy ran straight at her. Not walking, not hesitating, running, head down, boots pounding the dirt, arms pumping like his life depended on it. She barely had time to step back before he crashed into her skirts, wrapping his arms around her waist and holding on with a strength that startled her. His face pressed against her stomach, his shoulders shaking, breath hitching like he'd run a mile. "Mama," he sobbed, "you came back." The word hit her like a blow to the chest. The world around them seemed to pause. The creak of the train, the hiss of steam, the murmurs of townsfolk fading into a dull roar. She stared down at the boy clinging to her, heart hammering, mind scrambling for sense where there was none. Her voice caught. "I think you've made a mistake, sweetheart." He shook his head violently. "No, it's you. I knew it was you." A man's voice cut in, rough and sharp with alarm. "Eli." She looked up to see him striding toward them through the dust, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes dark with panic and disbelief. He grabbed the boy gently but firmly, trying to pull him back. "Eli, let go. I'm sorry, he's confused." The boy clung tighter. "She's Mama," he cried. "I know it is." The man froze. For a moment, the whole platform went still. The woman, Maribel Hayes, felt every pair of eyes turned toward her. Curiosity, judgment, pity. She straightened slowly, heart pounding, and met the stranger's gaze. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I think your son has mistaken me for someone else." He studied her face, really looked at her, and something unreadable crossed his expression. Grief, perhaps, or shock, or a memory clawing its way to the surface. "I'm sorry," he said again, quieter this time. "He's been through a lot." The boy finally loosened his grip, though he didn't step away. His eyes searched her face with desperate hope, as if afraid she might vanish if he looked away. "I thought you were Mama," he whispered. Maribel swallowed the ache rising in her throat. She knelt so they were eye to eye. "I'm not," she said gently, "but I'm very glad I found you." The boy stared at her, studying her face with heartbreaking intensity, as if committing it to memory. Then he nodded once, slow and solemn. "I'm Eli," he said. "I'm Maribel." Behind them, the train gave a long, mournful whistle. The sound echoed across the open plains, marking departures, endings, and the start of something else neither of them could yet name. Just minutes earlier, Maribel had stepped off that same train with her heart in her throat and her future packed into a single battered suitcase. She'd traveled 3 days from Pennsylvania, riding through dust and sun and sleepless nights, clinging to the hope that the man she'd agreed to marry would be waiting at the end of the line. But he wasn't. She'd stood on the platform scanning every face, watching strangers reunite and depart, her hope thinning with each passing second. No tall man with kind eyes, no sign bearing her name, no one stepping forward to claim her, only silence. And then the boy. Now she stood there, caught between his small hand gripping her skirt and the steady gaze of the man who had come running after him. "I'm Caleb Turner," he said at last. "And I'm sorry about all this. My son, he lost his mother last winter." Maribel nodded. She could hear it in his voice, the weight of grief, the exhaustion of a man who had been carrying too much for too long. "I didn't mean to upset him," she said. "I just arrived. I was expecting someone else." He frowned slightly. "Someone else?" "Yes, a man named—" She hesitated. Saying the name felt foolish now. "Miles Dandridge." The effect was immediate. Caleb's jaw tightened. His eyes hardened. The warmth in his expression cooled into something sharper. "Dandridge," he repeated. The way he said it made her stomach drop. "You know him?" she asked. "I do," he replied. "And I'm sorry to tell you this, but if you were expecting him to meet you here, you may be waiting a long time." The words hit her like cold water. "What do you mean?" Caleb glanced down at the boy, then back at her. "I think we should talk somewhere quieter." The platform was still busy with travelers and onlookers pretending not to listen. Maribel felt suddenly exposed, as if every eye could see the truth she was trying not to face. Yes," she said, "that would be good." Caleb nodded and placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. "Eli, go on ahead to the wagon." The boy hesitated, looking between them, then nodded and ran off toward a small, dust-covered wagon nearby. Maribel watched him go, then turned back to Caleb. "I'm sorry if he frightened you."
"He didn't," Caleb said. "He just hasn't had an easy year."
"Neither," she thought, "have I." They walked in silence toward the wagon, the heat shimmering around them. Maribel's heart pounded as she braced herself for whatever he was about to say. "I don't know how to tell you this gently," he began, stopping beside the wagon. "But Miles Dandridge isn't the man he pretends to be." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "He's not someone you should trust. He's done this before, placed advertisements, promised marriage, then disappeared when things didn't go his way." The words landed like stones. He wrote to me, she whispered. He said he wanted a wife, a home, he promised. He promises a lot of things, Caleb said quietly, and keeps very few of them. Her knees felt weak. She gripped the edge of the wagon for support. I sold nearly everything to come here, she said. I have nowhere else to go. Caleb watched her carefully, seeing the fear she tried to hide, the way her shoulders tensed as if bracing for another blow. You can stay at my place tonight, he said after a moment. Just until you figure out your next step. She looked up sharply. I don't want to impose. You're not. His voice was firm, certain. You're not safe alone out here, and I won't leave you stranded. A gust of wind swept dust across the platform. Somewhere behind them, the train whistle sounded again, long and lonely. Maribel drew in a breath, steadying herself. Thank you, she said quietly. Caleb nodded once. Come on, it's not far. As they walked toward the waiting wagon, she felt the weight of the day settle over her. Her carefully planned future had collapsed before it ever began. Yet, strangely, something inside her felt steadier than it had in months. She didn't know this man. She didn't know this town. She didn't know what waited for her beyond the next hour. But as the boy reached up and slipped his small hand into hers, holding tight as if afraid she might disappear, she realized something else. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. And for the first time since stepping off that train, that thought didn't terrify her. The wagon rolled slowly away from the station, its wooden wheels creaking in rhythm with the dirt road beneath them. Dust lifted in soft clouds behind the horse, curling into the warm afternoon air like smoke from a dying fire. Maribel sat stiffly on the narrow bench, her hands folded in her lap, the hem of her skirt brushing the wooden floor. She felt the eyes of the town on her back long after they had left the platform behind. Whispers followed them like ghosts, questions she couldn't hear but could feel. Beside her, the boy, Eli, sat close, his shoulder brushing hers with every bump in the road. He leaned against her without hesitation, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She wasn't sure whether to pull away or let him rest there, and in the end, she did nothing at all. Caleb drove in silence, his posture stiff, his gaze fixed ahead. The muscles in his jaw moved as if he were grinding his teeth, working through thoughts he didn't yet want to speak aloud. You don't have to take me far, Maribel said softly after a while. Just somewhere safe until I can figure out what to do. He glanced at her, then back to the road. I won't leave you on the side of the road, not today. That was all he said, but something in his voice, quiet, firm, settled her nerves more than any promise could have. They traveled several miles in silence, the land stretching wide and empty around them. Rolling fields, scattered trees, fences leaning under the weight of time. It was beautiful in a lonely, aching way. The kind of beauty that made you feel very small and very seen all at once. When the ranch finally came into view, Maribel felt her chest tighten. It wasn't grand, but it was solid. A wide porch wrapped around the front of a sturdy house. A barn stood off to the side, weathered but well kept. Everything looked worn but cared for, as if someone had loved it deeply and held on through hard years. This is it, Caleb said simply. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands firm and steady. She noticed the way he waited until her feet were firmly on the ground before letting go. Eli hopped down beside her, already tugging at her sleeve. This is my house, he announced proudly. That's my room. He pointed toward a window on the second floor. And that's where Mama used to sit and sew. The word landed heavy between them. Caleb cleared his throat. Why don't you come inside? You look like you could use some water. Inside, the house was quiet but lived in, clean but not pristine. A man's home kept up out of necessity rather than care. Boots by the door, a coat draped over a chair, a faint smell of wood smoke and soap. Maribel took it all in slowly, absorbing the details, grounding herself. She had survived worse. Caleb poured her a glass of water and watched as she drank. When she finished, he gestured toward a chair. You should sit. She obeyed, her knees weak now that the adrenaline was fading. Eli hovered nearby, watching her with wide, curious eyes. I'm sorry about earlier, she said quietly. About the scene at the station. You didn't cause it, Caleb replied. That man did. I should have known better than to trust him. He leaned against the table, folding his arms. You did what you had to do. That doesn't make you foolish, it makes you human. The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Silence settled between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke. I don't have anywhere to go. He nodded once. I know. I won't be trouble, she added quickly. I can cook, clean, sew. I'll work for my keep. I don't expect charity. He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. I don't have much to offer, he said. Just a roof, food, and honest work, and I won't lie to you, life here isn't easy. But if you need a place to stay for a while, you can stay. Relief flooded her so suddenly her eyes burned. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli beamed. "You can stay in Mama's room." Caleb shot him a look. "Eli?" "It's okay," Maribel said gently. "I can take the spare room if there is one." "There is," he said, relieved. "You'll be comfortable enough." The boy nodded, satisfied, and tugged on her hand. "I'll show you." As he led her down the narrow hallway, Maribel glanced back once more at Caleb. He stood in the doorway watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between worry and relief, guarded hope and fear. She followed Eli into a small bedroom with a single bed and a window overlooking the fields. It was simple but clean, sunlight spilling across the quilt like a blessing. "It's not fancy," Eli said apologetically. "It's perfect," she replied honestly. He beamed. When he left her alone to unpack, Maribel sat on the edge of the bed and let the weight of the day settle into her bones. Her hands trembled as she smoothed the blanket. Everything she owned sat in one small case at her feet. She exhaled slowly. She had come to Wyoming expecting to become a wife. Instead, she had become a stranger in a strange house, bound to a man she barely knew and a child who had already claimed her heart. It was terrifying, and yet something inside her whispered that she was exactly where she needed to be. She lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the ranch, boots on wood, a door creaking, the low murmur of a man speaking to his horses. For the first time since she'd stepped onto the train weeks ago, her heart slowed. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, carrying with it the promise of change. And in that quiet, uncertain moment, Maribel allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this broken beginning might lead to something whole. Morning came softly to the Turner Ranch, not with bells or whistles or the rush of city noise, but with the slow creak of floorboards, the low murmur of cattle, and sunlight slipping through the thin curtains like a gentle hand brushing Maribel awake. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then she heard the clatter of a pan downstairs, the steady rhythm of someone moving with purpose, and the faint sound of a child humming off key. Reality settled around her like a warm blanket. She sat up slowly, smoothing her dress, and listened. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't the night before, less empty, less heavy. Still strange, but no longer frightening. She washed her face in the small basin and smoothed her hair, then stepped into the hallway. The scent of coffee and bacon drifted up the stairs, warm and grounding. When she reached the kitchen, she found Caleb at the stove, sleeves rolled up, turning strips of bacon with a fork. Eli sat at the table, swinging his legs and humming to himself, a half-finished drawing spread in front of him. "Morning," Caleb said, glancing over his shoulder. "Morning," she replied softly. Eli beamed. "You stayed." She smiled. "I said I would." He grinned wider, as if he'd been holding his breath all night. Caleb set a plate on the table. "Sit. You must be starving." She hesitated only a moment before taking the seat he pulled out for her. The simple kindness of the gesture tightened something in her chest. They ate in a comfortable quiet. The food was plain: eggs, bread, strong coffee. But it tasted better than anything she'd had in weeks. When the meal was done, Caleb cleared his throat. "I should explain some things," he said, "about the ranch, about expectations." She nodded. "I like that." He leaned against the counter, folding his arms. "I won't pretend this place is easy. There's work every day, long days, sometimes dangerous ones. And I can't promise comfort or certainty. But I can promise fairness." She met his gaze. "That's all I'm asking." He hesitated. "There's something else you should know. People around here talk. They already know you came with me from the station. They'll talk more when they realize you're staying." "I expected that," she said quietly. "Some will assume things that aren't true." She lifted her chin. "They already have." A flicker of approval crossed his face. "Good. Then you understand what you're stepping into." Eli slid off his chair and padded over to her, holding up a drawing. It showed a crooked house, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a much smaller figure holding both their hands. "That's us," he announced proudly. Her throat tightened. "It's very good." "You can keep it," he said, "so you remember you belong here." Caleb opened his mouth to correct him, then closed it again. Later that morning, Maribel set to work. She cleaned the kitchen thoroughly, scrubbed the floors, and sorted through cupboards that hadn't been properly organized in years. The work grounded her. It gave her something to do with her hands while her mind processed everything that had happened. By midday, she'd found a rhythm. The house began to feel less like a stranger's place and more like somewhere she might fit. She stepped outside to hang laundry and found Caleb repairing a fence near the corral. Sweat darkened his shirt and his movements were strong and practiced. He glanced up when he saw her. "You don't have to do all that," he said. I know, she replied. I want to. He nodded, accepting the answer without question. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the air filled with the sound of hammering and the flutter of cloth on the line. The sun climbed higher, warming her skin. When she finished, she turned to see Caleb watching her. Not in the way men often did, with appraisal or hunger, but with something quieter. Thoughtful. Thank you, he said. For what? For staying? She hesitated. I'm not sure how long I'll be able to. I need to find work. Something that doesn't tie me to you. His jaw tightened slightly. You can stay as long as you need. I don't want to be a burden. You're not. Their eyes held, something unspoken passing between them. Then he cleared his throat and turned back to his work. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in amber and gold, they sat on the porch together. Eli played at their feet, lining up pebbles and talking to himself in quiet narration. You know, Caleb said, he hasn't talked this much since his mother died. Maribel looked at the boy, then back at Caleb. He misses her, yes. His voice softened. And he's scared you'll disappear too. Her heart clenched. I won't. He studied her face carefully. You don't make promises lightly, do you? No, she said. I've learned not to. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. I don't know what the right thing is anymore, Caleb admitted quietly. I thought I did. I thought keeping to myself, keeping my head down, was the best way to survive. But you showed up and changed everything. I didn't mean to, she said. I know, but sometimes the things we don't plan are the ones that matter most. She turned to him, meeting his gaze. For a long moment, neither spoke. There was something unspoken between them now. Uncertain, fragile, but real. And for the first time since she stepped off that train, Maribel felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. Not safety, not certainty, but possibility. The days settled into a quiet rhythm after that. Mornings began with the sound of boots on wood and the smell of coffee drifting through the house. Maribel learned the small habits of the place, the way Caleb liked his eggs, the way Eli always left his shoes by the door, the way the wind changed direction just before noon. It was a simple life, but it carried a steady pulse that soothed her restless thoughts. She made herself useful wherever she could. She mended shirts, scrubbed floors, and learned which cupboards held what. She learned how to coax bread from stubborn dough, and how to calm the old mare when she grew skittish. Each task gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. Caleb noticed, though he rarely said anything. Sometimes he watched her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Other times he found reasons to stay outside longer than necessary, as if giving her space to breathe. He never asked questions about her past, and she never volunteered them. The silence between them became a kind of understanding. Eli, however, filled every quiet moment. He followed Maribel everywhere, asking endless questions, telling her stories that wandered without direction, laughing at his own jokes. She listened patiently, responding with warmth and attention he seemed to crave. One afternoon, as she folded laundry at the table, he climbed onto the bench beside her. Will you read to me later? He asked. Of course, she said. He hesitated. You won't go away like Mama did, will you? The question struck her harder than she expected. She set the folded shirt down slowly. I don't plan to go anywhere. He studied her face, searching for something. Then he nodded, satisfied, and leaned against her side. From the doorway, Caleb watched the moment unfold. Something in his chest tightened, sharp and unfamiliar. He turned away before either of them noticed. That evening, a storm rolled in without warning. The sky darkened early, clouds piling thick and heavy. Wind rattled the windows, and thunder rolled low across the plains. Maribel stood at the sink watching the rain streak down the glass. The sound made her chest ache with memories she'd rather forget. Caleb came to stand beside her. Storms can be bad out here, he said. Sometimes they last all night. She nodded. I don't mind storms. He glanced at her. You don't? I've had worse. The rain came harder, drumming against the roof. Lightning flashed, bright enough to turn the room white for a heartbeat. A crash of thunder followed, sharp and close. Eli cried out from his room. Maribel moved before she could think, hurrying down the hall. She found him sitting upright in bed, eyes wide, breathing fast. It's all right, she said softly, sitting beside him. It's just the storm. He clutched her sleeve. I don't like the loud parts. I know. She smoothed his hair back gently. Listen to me. The storm can't hurt you here. He leaned into her, trembling. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him close until his breathing slowed. From the doorway, Caleb watched the scene in silence. Something loosened in his chest, something he'd kept locked away since the night his world had broken. You can stay with him, he said quietly, if you want. She looked up at him, surprised. Are you sure? He nodded once. He trusts you. She stayed. The storm raged on outside, thunder cracking and rain hammering the roof. Inside, Maribel sat on the edge of the bed, humming softly while Eli drifted back to sleep, his hand still clutching her sleeve. When the house finally fell quiet again, she rose carefully and stepped into the hallway. Caleb was still there, leaning against the wall. Thank you, he said. For what? For being here when he needed someone. She hesitated. He needs you too. His jaw tightened. I know, I just don't always know how to be what he needs. She studied his face, seeing the exhaustion beneath his steady exterior. You're trying, she said gently. That matters. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither dared say. The thunder faded into the distance. The house settled. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. Inside, something shifted. Neither of them spoke, but both felt it. The sense that lines were blurring, that what had begun as necessity was slowly becoming something else. Something dangerous, something tender, and neither of them stepped away. The storm left the land washed clean. Morning came slow and pale, sunlight stretching across the fields like it was testing its strength. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and for the first time since Maribel arrived, the world felt quiet in a way that didn't ache. She rose early, careful not to wake anyone, and stepped outside. The ground was soft beneath her boots, cool with dew. Birds stirred in the trees, shaking loose the last of the rain. She breathed in deeply, letting the calm settle her nerves. She didn't hear Caleb until he spoke. You're up early. She turned to find him standing a few steps behind her, sleeves rolled, hair still damp from washing. He looked tired but rested in a way she hadn't seen before. I couldn't sleep anymore, she said. The air felt too still. He nodded. Storms do that, leave everything quiet after. They stood side by side for a moment, neither speaking. The space between them felt different now, less uncertain, more fragile. I didn't mean to overstep last night, she said softly. With Eli. He shook his head. You did exactly what he needed. She glanced at him. And you? He hesitated. I didn't know how much I needed it too. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She looked away, giving him room to finish if he chose. I've been trying to do this alone, he continued. Raising him, keeping everything together. I thought needing help meant I was failing. She turned to him then. It doesn't. He met her eyes. Something in his expression shifted, guarded walls easing, if only a little. Maybe not, he said. They stood there as the sun climbed higher, the quiet between them no longer uncomfortable. Later that morning, Caleb set out to mend a fence on the far edge of the property. Maribel offered to help, but he shook his head. You've done enough already. Stay close to the house. She watched him go, then turned back inside. There were chores to do, but her thoughts wandered. She found herself pausing often, listening for the sound of his boots or Eli's laughter. When the boy came bounding into the kitchen with a bundle of sticks, she smiled. What are those for? A fort, he declared. Outside. Papa says I can build one if I don't break anything. She laughed softly. That sounds like a good plan. They spent the morning building something crooked and imperfect, but sturdy enough to stand. Eli worked with fierce concentration, tongue between his teeth, occasionally stopping to ask her opinion. Does this look right? It looks strong, she said. That's what matters. He grinned at that. By the time Caleb returned, the fort stood proudly near the fence, a patchwork of wood and imagination. He surveyed it with raised brows. Well, he said, that's impressive. Eli puffed out his chest. We built it together. Caleb looked at Maribel, something warm passing between them. I see that. That afternoon, clouds began to gather again, darker this time. The wind picked up, rattling the trees. You should come in, Caleb said. Storm's coming. They barely made it inside before the sky opened. Rain pounded the roof harder than before. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. Eli flinched. Maribel moved without thinking, kneeling beside him. It's all right, she said softly. I'm here. He leaned into her, gripping her sleeve. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders, steady and sure. Caleb watched from across the room, something twisting in his chest. He had never planned for this, had never wanted anyone close enough to matter this much. The storm raged on, louder and wilder than the last, but inside there was warmth, safety. As the rain slowed, Eli's breathing evened out. He leaned against Maribel, half asleep. Caleb spoke quietly. You're good for him. She looked up. I care about him. He hesitated, then added, and for me, her heart skipped. I don't want to cause trouble. You're not, he said firmly. You're helping us heal. The word settled between them, heavy and honest. She looked down at Eli, then back at Caleb. "I don't know how long I'll stay," she admitted. "But I don't want to hurt either of you." "I know," he said, "and I won't ask you to promise anything." The storm eased, the rain softening to a whisper. The light outside shifted, turning golden once more. For a long moment they simply stood there, 3 souls under one roof, bound by circumstance and something growing quietly between them. Neither of them said it, but both felt it. This was no longer just shelter. It was beginning to feel like home. The morning came soft and pale, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Maribel stood at the window, watching the sun climb over the distant hills. The ranch lay quiet, wrapped in a stillness that felt different than before. Not empty, not heavy, just waiting. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Caleb in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You're up early," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she replied. "Too much on my mind." He nodded, understanding more than she said. They stood there in the half-light, the silence between them filled with things neither had yet spoken aloud. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I need to tell you something," he said, "about why I really asked you to stay." She turned fully toward him, her heart giving a small, nervous beat. "I didn't ask because I needed help around the house," he continued. "And I didn't ask because Eli needed someone, though he did. I asked because I was afraid to be alone anymore." The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. "I lost my wife 2 years ago," he went on. "After that, everything felt hollow. I kept going for Eli's sake, but I was empty inside. Then you came along, and suddenly the house didn't feel so quiet. I could breathe again." She swallowed, emotion thick in her throat. "I never meant to step into her place," she said softly. "I would never want to replace her." "I know," he replied, "and I'd never ask you to. What I'm saying is, you brought something back into this house that I thought was gone for good." They stood facing each other, the weight of unspoken truths pressing close. "I don't know what this is," she said, "but I know I don't want to lose it." He took a slow step closer. "Neither do I." The space between them narrowed, not with urgency but with care. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently brushed hers. She didn't pull away. In that quiet moment, something settled between them. Not a promise, not a vow, but a shared understanding. A soft voice interrupted them. "Papa?" They turned to see